Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today, for attending our first of a two-part series, this one entitled Women, Leadership, and Spirituality. And I'm so delighted to have all of you here today. Thank you for saying yes to this very important conversation. My name is Nancy Board, and I'm the co-founder and COO of Global Women for Wellbeing. I'm here today primarily because my co-host that normally would be here, Mim Senf, has had a family emergency. So I want us to send her some love and some good thoughts, and I'll share a little bit more about that in just a moment. But again, welcome to everyone who's joining us today from wherever you are. So I'd like to begin by introducing these wonderful women on the screen here. And I'll start with Lynette Davis. Lynette is a writer, a mental health advocate, a love activist, and really a champion for all people. But I met Lynn through her work with GW4W and primarily her focus in her work with women entrepreneurs and helping them through the struggles that they face with mental health issues, which probably a lot of women are not familiar with. A lot of people in general may not know. Lynn started a business surrounding this entitled Love Yourself, Love Your Business. And it really focuses on mental health and suicide prevention initiatives for entrepreneurs and for small business owners. She's also an Amazon top-selling author of a book that I highly recommend called Success to Die For. And again, that book focuses on her research with female entrepreneurs and their struggles. Lynn is the backbone of GW4W. She is our administrative guru. She's an absolute delight to get to work with every day, and our organization would not be where we are without her generous support. So thank you, Lynn, and welcome. Welcome to today. The last thing I want to mention about Lynn is that she is currently working on her master's degree, and she is in seminary. So she'll have some important things, I think, to say today. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Nancy.
I'd now like to introduce Isabelle Duchesneau from Quebec. And what an interesting background you bring, Isabelle. I'm really delighted to have you here today. Isabelle has a background in hotels and wellness tourism. So it's an interesting mix as to why is she here today. Well, she's currently the managing director of an almost 4-century-old monastery, or monastère, in Quebec that was founded by the Augustine nuns. And I know you'll speak more about that, but it's a fascinating project. I'm really delighted to have learned about it, and I'm looking forward to hear more about your work there. This monastery continues its mission that was based on the founding principles of the nuns who founded it, but now it's been built up and modernized to incorporate so many aspects of our modern world trending toward wellness initiatives and overall well-being. So welcome, Isabelle.
Thank you, Nancy.
And I'm delighted to have Linda Howard here with us today. Hi, Linda.
Hey.
It's so good to see you again.
Likewise.
Yeah, the last time we were with one another was at the Breakers event that we hosted about 1.5 years ago.
Yes.
So it's nice to see you again. Linda just brings a wealth of experience. I don't know where to begin with you, Linda. You're a JD. You have been in the business world and really, I think, focusing on mission-driven work for about 35 years, focusing on social, corporate responsibility, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, and really connecting people and in organizations to better and stronger purpose. You've worked in Africa, the Middle East, and in the US, and you are showing up in so many places to help guide us, I think, in a way to focus again our ethical perspective with our higher purpose initiatives. So looking forward to hearing more from you, Linda. Welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Rabbi Deborah Salomon. Rabbi Deb, welcome. Again, the last time we were together was also at our think tank at the Breakers about 1.5 years ago.
Yeah, and that was really a great event. It was really a great
wonderful people there. It really was a lovely initiative,
Yeah.
and I thank you both for being part of that. Rabbi Deb, you have an amazing background as well. You have founded a program called Hebrew Wizards back in 2005, which is a way to look at and change Hebrew education for schools throughout the US, which again is amazing because I understand your curriculum is now used in over 50 programs. So congratulations to you on that. And as if that's not enough, you also created Better to Be, which is bringing seniors and young people together and working on community projects, which I want to hear so much more about as well if we have time. So welcome, Rabbi Deb.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And then finally to our moderator, facilitator today, Dr. Renee Moorefield. Renee, such a pleasure to be with you again. I think the first time we met was through the Global Wellness Institute's initiative where you were moderating a panel discussion in New York, which Renee is a big part of that organization. She sits on their advisory board, and you have been in positions to moderate many panels like that throughout the world. Your experience tends to focus mostly on mission-driven work also, and helping leaders thrive. I know that you've spent your career working with a lot of the big corporations, such as guiding Coca-Cola, Hermes, Hyatt, and several others, Nike. You also built a conscious brand referred to as Be Well, Lead Well, which so is resonates with the GW4W philosophy. Renee, I understand you also did your dissertation on spirituality and leadership, which is fascinating, and really looking forward to hearing maybe some snippets of that as we go through today. I understand that we only have an hour today, but I welcome all of you, and I'm so thankful to have you here today. But before we begin, I just feel that the time is right to just ask all of you to just take a moment, close your eyes if that works for you, or just soften your gaze. And I just want us to take about 30 seconds to bring our attention and support to Mim Semph. Mim is having some challenges in her immediate family right now. Pretty big challenges, health challenges, and I'd like for all of us to just send her loving thoughts, energy, support, prayers. Thank you. And Renee, thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Nancy, thank you so much, and thanks all of you for being a part of this conversation. Nancy, particularly you and GW4W for creating the context in which these kinds of activities can be happening. You all have been doing a really important work to support women and well-being and leadership globally. So, and it's so nice to meet everyone on the panel. I'm going to dive right in, and I'm going to ask a question first to Rabbi Deb. So since the pandemic began, we have really noticed, I've noticed in my own research, a real rise in spirituality. And as one kind of data point on that is in March 2020, an association for religion, economics, and culture was able to track to see that prayer, the interest in prayer, really shot up right about the time that the pandemic became officially global. We collectively understood this is global. And we've also found out through that research that with every 80,000 new registered COVID cases, there is a doubling increase in prayer, in a search intensity for prayer. So people are on, we're searching for meaning, we're searching for understanding, we're searching for practices that it can help us navigate this challenge. So here's my question to you, Rabbi Deb. How do you believe spirituality supports people during times of challenge? We're talking about the pandemic now, but it could be any challenge, climate crisis, grief in our personal lives. So how does spirituality support us during times of challenge?
I think it's really easy to feel happy and good when everything is going great. But I think right now we're faced in a specific time of challenge, and we need more than ever to come together as a people. And people gravitate and are desperate right now. And I feel that many people are who would normally not gravitate towards prayer are now looking and saying, I need something higher. I need to pray. I need to lean on another person to help us feel comfort. And I know a lot of people have called me up and said, you know, Rabbi Deb, I don't really believe in God that much, but right now I need you to do a prayer. I have a loved one that is sick. And in times of desperation, people really come together. I feel like humanity really flings into action during these most traumatic and difficult times. And people need to come together and use prayer. Prayer does not have to be a Hebrew prayer, a liturgy right from the Bible. It could be as simple as a thank you. It could be as simple as a love note to one another. People are in desperation. And when you are in desperation, you literally are trying to find something that you can cling on to. And whether it's a beautiful sunset, whether it's sitting by the moon and staring at the sky and finding gratitude in these very, very difficult times. And I think if we trade our expectations of what we expect the world to be at any given time and we start becoming a little bit more grateful, I feel that it opens your heart and lends yourself more to being thankful and to offering prayer for not only ourselves but for others.
So I feel like I just heard a few things in regards to how spirituality can help us during challenging times. One that we talked about was prayer, but you also brought up community and us needing each other, and then this idea of gratitude, and underlying gratitude, this sense of just pure acceptance, really in some ways letting go of expectation and being grateful and thankful for what is and accepting what is.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we immediately did is we, as a community, offered Friday night Sabbath services on Zoom, and we brought in all of the musicians that we can find that are part of Hebrew Wizards, but also we know a lot of musicians that were out of work throughout the country, and we brought them in. And each week we would present a new musician to offer love and guidance and spirituality. And so we connected 20 weeks of Friday night services that we would never normally have had. The silver linings are jumping out on these like little moments. And it gave everyone a connection just to be like, we're in this together. This is scary, but we can do this. And needed to pause and reflect and think about how we need to turn all of our anxiety into more of an appreciation and gratitude. And when we started to realize how to do that, we realized we're all in the same boat. Every single person, no matter who they were faced with the same situation. And it gives me comfort to know that everyone's in it together. And I wasn't the only one scared. My daughter, who is 28 years old, was one of the first cases of COVID, and she was in the hospital with pneumonia, COVID pneumonia, and I could not be there. And I literally, I've lost a father, I've lost a brother, but I prayed to God more than ever in my life and just pleaded. So I can only imagine me as a rabbi, how I felt in that time of desperation, how other people are and how I can help facilitate a sense of ease in this time.
Something I want to call out that you said that leads me to my next question. You said, how do we come together and take the anxiety that we're all feeling. Number one, acknowledge it, but also transform it into some positive action. So my next question comes from a quote from theologian Martin Palmer. He says that spirituality doesn't change the way if spirituality doesn't change the way you think and act, then it isn't spirituality. And when I read that, I thought, this is such a strong statement. If spirituality doesn't change the way you think and act, then it isn't spirituality. So Lynette, I want to ask you a couple of questions about this. The first one is, as a leader of an organization yourself, we've heard your background and know the incredible work that you've been doing as a leader. What role do you see spirituality playing in how we think and act as we navigate this pandemic? And linked to that, I'd love to hear your thoughts about what spiritual care is or could be happening. Because in this idea of spiritual care, a lot of people probably haven't had a chance to really think about. But now we're getting a great opportunity to think about what could be happening in workplaces today to support the well-being and resilience of people.
Okay. So, well, let me first address the first question because I can go on with the second one. So you asked, what does spirituality look like with regards to, could you repeat that first part of it?
As a leader of an organization, how do you see spirituality can affect how we think and act as we navigate this pandemic?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so when I think about spirituality in a general sense, spirituality has a lot to do with meaning making. You know, a lot of us go, what's the difference between spirituality and religion? And so, at its core, spirituality is about meaning making. And meaning making can look like connectivity, can look like compassion, can look like questions about, what am I here for? What is my purpose? And then we get into some things that look more like ethics. What is a good decision? What is a decision that's going to hurt or harm? And so when I think about spirituality in the context of leadership, most of the time I think about how my actions, my decision making is going to affect those people who are participating in the co-creation of what I'm building. And what that looks like is me asking myself, am I moving and making these decisions from a place of fear? Or am I moving and making these decisions from a place of love? And when I move from a place of fear, then I encompass and embody a sense of scarcity, a sense of wanting to power an ego trip, as well as a sense of clinging to whatever feels familiar to me. And how that translates is I began to center everything on what I can do to make things comfortable for me, rather than reaching out and extending and seeing how what I'm doing or what I'm saying, how does that affect all of us as a whole, interconnectivity. So that's the way I look at spirituality in terms of leadership. If I'm moving from a place of love, then I'm not centered on competition. Instead, I'm looking at collaboration. If I'm moving from a place of love, then I'm not so concerned about how can I get ahead, but how can we as an organization, as a community, can build something together that will not only help and benefit just one person or a segment, but how can we do this together so that we can create more positivity and more positive emotions such as compassion and empathy in the world. So that's the way I look at spirituality when it comes to leadership and organizations. And to translate that, because that sounds very theoretical, right? So to translate that into, what does this look like in terms of spiritual care, and what does this look like in terms of spiritual practice, especially in times of pandemic? And I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what Rabbi Deb said, it looks like if we're sitting here and we're all feeling this fear and this anxiousness about how are we going to get this work done that we know it needs to be done in the world, but we can't even get near each other. How do we continue to grow and to change the world if we're stuck in a mindset that looks like, well, I can't do anything because I can't touch anybody, or I can't do anything because we're not allowed to actually go out into the streets anymore. So what we do is we open our hearts and our minds to ways that we can collectively help people without self-sabotaging ourselves. Because, and I always say this, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't give what you don't have to give. And what that looks like is doing things like, okay, well, we will gather on Zoom so that we can make sure and ensure that people are safe and we are not social distancing because we're still being social, but we're physically distancing so that we can be mindful and care for the health and well-being of people who may live with vulnerable populations. I personally right now um, am helping my mother caregive for my grandmother. So I have to be very careful about who I am around and where I go. And that's leadership that translates from not only the home, but out into the world and into the workplace. If I'm around somebody in the workplace and I'm not being mindful of how I am um, protecting myself, things as simple as wearing a mask, um, then I know that I risk giving somebody else something who may then go home and take it to a loved one. And that's what this is, when it comes to pandemic, that's what this really is about. It's not about, well, I'm perfectly fine and I'm perfectly healthy and I don't have any symptoms. But when we look at it from a spiritual sense, that spiritual sense says we're not an island. So we're all connected to each other and we're all interconnected. And so I am not thinking about just me and my tribe mindset. I'm thinking about who else is this going to affect if I may possibly be a carrier of symptoms that will then take to somebody else who has living with somebody who's vulnerable. It helps me to think about being sensitive to people who are not used to being on Zoom all the time. And then going, am I going to have this meeting for 3 hours and not be mindful of the fact that they might have eye exhaustion? What does this look like to break things up, to be able to compliment and be conscious of what's going on in the lives of other people outside of my own context? I don't have children, but it doesn't mean that I can't reach out and be empathetic to somebody who does have children. What is it like to go from a workplace and then have to be home with your 6-year-old when you're not a teacher, you don't like teaching, and now you have to teach and make sure that they sit and stay still in front of a camera all day? What does that look like? And how do I support my employees, my contractors in these kind of circumstances? I have to think about these things, even though I don't have children, but they do. So, that's what working from a place of love rather than fear or ego looks like in pandemic times.
I want to really reinforce some things, some points that you are making that I think are so important. And one is this, and I believe it as well, one of the most significant pivots we can make as leaders, as human beings, is this pivot from operating out of fear and stress to operating out of well-being and generativity. And this level of that movement from fear to love that you mentioned, scarcity to abundance, how important that is, and how difficult that can be, how easy and how difficult at the same time. So that's one. The second point that I want to really highlight that you said, Lynette, is about the definition of leadership, that it is so easy to put a box around leadership and think that that's someone in a titled role to do, but that we're all leading. We're all leading our families, we're leading in relationships, we're leading in our communities, we're leading in our neighborhoods, just by virtue of, if the way I like to think about leadership is, how do I use my life energy towards positive results? And so that's a whole different frame of reference of leadership that you really highlighted. And then the third that I absolutely love, and the word that it makes me think of, is interdependence. So it's that, it's never, ever, ever, we know ourselves through our relationships with each other and our relationships with the world and our relationships with something greater. So can the decisions we make come from that knowing that we're interdependent? So not just my tribe, but something greater. So I want to shift, Isabelle, to you, because I know you're in a situation that you also have an opportunity to put in a monastery that is, we've heard now, hundreds of years old, a working monastery, put some of these principles into action. And I'd love to hear what spiritual care has meant during this time for your organization.
Yes, well, like you said, Le Monastère des Augustines was founded almost 400 years ago by a community representing one of the first entrepreneur women communities in North America. So it's something great. And today, we continue to write the story of this founding heritage in a contemporary and non-secular environment. And the leadership model of those women is a true inspiration today. So for us, we based our leadership on three main aspects it's direct inspiration from the Augustinian nuns. First, make sure that everyone share a mission, values, and a common goal, so everyone find meaning in what they do, and understand how they attach also to something bigger than themselves. So it's very important to share that and make sure that everyone knows. Second, create a work environment where there's social support, but not only by the leaders, but all colleagues as well. An environment where personal growth and the development of everyone's full potential is promoted. And there's different ways we can do that also. And third, the importance of self-caring. And it's nice to know that, well, I should add, without guilt. So self-caring without guilt today.
Okay, that was very important. Ad, Isabelle. That was a big ad.
Yes, that was a big ad. For the founders of the monastère, as nurses, caregivers of the monastère, nurses and hospital owners as well, their most important responsibility was to take care of themselves, so they would be at their best to take care of others. So that was their very first responsibility. Today, in our workplace, we need to emphasize the importance of taking breaks in our action-driven days, the importance of stopping once in a while just to breathe deeply. We don't know how to breathe anymore, and to be in silence, and the importance of taking time to know ourselves better with humility to help us be just a better person, mainly. So everything is based on those three aspects, and they're simple, but it's important to put that out front every day.
I love what you're saying, and what hits me is the question about spiritual care. Your answer to me is about, what does it mean to be an effective organization? If you could have had the same answers to what does it mean just to be an effective organization. And the one of those principles that feels like is coming so front and center, especially in the pandemic now, is this idea of self-care without guilt. Because many of us living in a state of burnout, isolation, and loneliness, some really serious situations, and it's often hard to know how to practice self-care without guilt and with complete compassion.
Yeah, and it starts with the leader, because if we feel guilty just to take a break, then it has an impact on our employees and our workplace. So it starts with the leader.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bridge. That's a great segue to the next question, because I'm going to ask a question about leadership. Nancy had mentioned something about wanting to know a little more about my dissertation, and it was pretty simple. I was looking at 101 leaders and asking them, they were doing different assessments around their biology, so psychometrics, um, physical metrics, and a process we use that's hard to describe to find out if their spiritual self, their sense of self, was core to their identity. And what I found with those 101 leaders is if the leaders had a sense of spirituality, no matter how they defined it, maybe they defined it as a walk in nature or a higher purpose or adherence to a faith or daily prayer or a contemplative practice, however they defined it, if that was core to their being, their identity, how they constructed their version of themselves, they showed up with lower cholesterol levels, lower triglyceride levels, better people-centric skills such as empathy and taking care of the health of the relationships they were in, so that which are so important in leadership. So I'm wondering, and I'm going to direct this question to you, Linda. I'm wondering for you, how does your spirituality help you as a leader? What connections do you make with your spiritual sensibility, your spiritual identity, your practices, and how they help you either manage stress or guide your decisions and actions as a leader and a whole human being?
Well, my spirituality is very much tied to my religion. So for me, the two go hand in hand, and uh, and it has guided so much about who I am in terms of my career, even just my career choice. I started out. I have a background in law, and I started out practicing law. And when you practice law, one of the first things that you learn is that you have to represent your client zealously. And so it's really about your client and it's not about you. So it's not about your values, it's not about your beliefs, but it's about you representing your client zealously. And sometimes that didn't necessarily align with my values. When I made the shift to start working in the space of compliance and ethics, that was more aligned. And a lot of times, because a lot of compliance is very regulatory, people don't understand like what's the difference. And I sum it up, and this is not a negative. This is just that lawyers tell you what you can do. What are you allowed to do within the confines of the law? Compliance and ethics officers tell you what you should do. And so you start to think beyond what does the regulations, what does the law say you can do? And you start thinking more about what impact is this going to have on my client? What impact is this going to have on the world? Where is the social responsibility in this? Where's our responsibility to community? So I made the shift from the legal space into the compliance and the ethics space. And in working in that space, I started to then even question things around equity and inclusion. And what does that really mean? So I worked in the healthcare space. And so I started looking at issues around health disparities and health inequities. And all of this is guided by where I am from a spiritual basis and where that religious guidance is. And that is a guidance around fairness. It's around ethics. It's around how you treat people, how you make decisions. And there's a Cherokee proverb that really resonated with me. And it says that, and I'm maybe paraphrasing a bit, but it says that when you came into the world, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in a way that when you leave the world, that the world cries and you rejoice.
Pretty.
And that really was very impactful for me. And that ties to a a belief in terms. I'm Muslim, and that's a belief. One of the beliefs of Muslims is that you get questioned about your deeds in the grave. So as soon as you hit the grave, you start getting questioned. And when I'm making decisions around leadership, one of the things that I ask myself is, how will you respond to this when you get asked that question in the grave? When you're asked, why did you do? You can't make decisions where profit is more important than humanity, because money you don't take with you. The only currency, in terms of my belief, the only currency that you have in the hereafter is your deeds. You don't take money with you. And so that guides a lot of choices that I make as a leader, that I look at how can I answer to this? Will I feel good about myself when I look in the mirror? And understanding that sometimes the decisions that you make, the choices that you make as a leader is not going to please everyone. And but if you're feeling comfortable that those decisions are aligned with good ethics and aligned with humanity and how you're treating people, usually what happens is that other people come along and they get behind the decision. I'll give you one example. I was in an organization where I was feeling as if there was decisions that were being made that weren't in the best interest of the organization, that they were really in the best interest of certain individuals. And I really pushed back, and I got a lot of pushback on it. And so, but I kept asking myself, is this the right thing to do? And I, held fast with the position. And eventually, those that were making decisions in their self-interest eventually left the organization. And those that came into the organization were people who were moving in the best interests of the organization. So for me, spirituality and in religion and the guidance is very closely tied. And I find that actually is a great stress management. A lot of stress is when you're doubting the decision and you're wondering, are people going to be happy? Are people going to be angry with me? So I find that has been also a tool for me to manage stress. If I can feel pretty good about, yeah, you're doing this for the right reason, the stress kind of rolls off.
I'm taking from this is that your faith has been such a guiding framework to, as a part of you, as a human being, as something to lean into, to make difficult decisions, not something that is separate than your career life or your family life, but absolutely core. So I'm appreciating how important that is. I'm going to shift to another question, because we've talked about spirituality as prayer, we've talked about community, we've talked about, we haven't said the word mindfulness, but I think we could have said the word mindfulness already by now. Acceptance, we've talked about a mission and vision and a framework. When I think about the pandemic and who knew that at this point we would still be here, dealing with a global pandemic, but here we are. And I was somewhere recently, it may have been a yoga class or somewhere, where the instructor said, I just want to stop for a moment and pause to say, we all made it here. We all made it right here. So let's just be grateful that we all made it right here. When I think about it, it can feel like, when you look at the numbers, the mental health issues, the job loss, the food deserts that that we're dealing with, particularly in the USA, but I know some of the same struggles are happening around the world. It can feel very dark. It can feel like we're in a bad story here. But I also have such a sense that there is something to celebrate, to not take any of that suffering lightly, but there's also, we can also evolve in this and celebrate. And so I would love to know, and Linda, I actually want to stick with you for a second and ask you, um, what are you, what's emerging for you? What are you noticing that we can be celebrating through this pandemic?
One thing I think, um, it's given us an opportunity to actually be still. And we've been, as a society, we've been moving so fast that we don't even realize how fast we're moving, and what we don't tune into. And so the pandemic has allowed us an opportunity to be still, to connect with family. People are spending time with their children that they never had an opportunity to spend before, and they like it. They're getting to, reacquaint themselves with their spouses. I had the opportunity. My mom is really incredible. She is 100 years old,
Aw.
still very independent. She lives by herself. And when the pandemic first really started reaching high numbers, and she lives in New Jersey, and New Jersey and New York, was the hot spot. So I kidnapped her and brought her to live with me for a little while. She thought it was going to be a week or two. It ended up being 3 months. But it was just incredible for me to be able to spend time, that kind of time with my mom for 3 months. I don't, she's 100. I hope she lives to be 120, but I don't know how long she's going to be here. But so for me, I think, I certainly experienced it in talking to other people. I think other people can talk about relationships that were rekindled and that they learned to appreciate in this pandemic.
Rabbi Deb, I'm wondering if you have anything to add. I see you shaking your head. I wonder if you
Yeah,
have.
I mean, I love what Linda shared. It's just exactly how I feel. And we're not the same religion. And I think it's so important to realize that no matter what religion you are, that we still look at the Bible. The Old Testament is the Torah. And it's so nice to, like, smack right in the middle is the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Love thy neighbor as thyself. It's really brought back the most, it's like the secret is sort of like coming out of us, like the most simple pleasures in life. Living with my family for 3.5 months, getting to know my future son-in-law in a beautiful, beautiful way, watching my children appreciate humanity, and appreciate adopting pets because they feel so obliged to do so, to speak out for social justice in a way that we've never even experienced, learning from my children in a way that I've never expected to realize. We really need to embrace that we each have light to bring, and shining our light on each other brings a bigger light. And there's so much love that has come out of this time. I felt so little pressure. I did feel a lot of anxiety when we dealt with the high holidays, because we had to recreate and reinvent. We had to do things that we never thought we were able to do, but we showed resilience and triumph during that time. So it made us stronger and appreciative. I feel so grateful. I have teens that I work with. I work with a big teen program, a community service program called Better Together, Better to Be. We created beautiful Zoom concerts, And we took 13 seniors that are lonely, and we gave them boxes and love notes and calls and Zoom calls. And we just tried to figure out what we could do and not harp on what we can't do. And when we think about all the possibilities, it really gives us such a strength and a powerful feeling. So I've I like riding the waves. I'm not like a calm water person. So these are waves and showing us how we can swim and we can swim together. It shows the best of humanity. So to me, there's so many silver linings in the moment that I keep being positive, and I really stress to the teachers and to our musicians and our teens that are leading our families and students how we came through this period together, and we're just stronger and better because of it.
And maybe part of what you're talking about, maybe part of it is us actually recognizing our resilience. So, the community, the resilience, the appreciation that you're talking about, just the act of pausing and recognizing,
Yeah.
like that.
Changing your expectations for appreciation. And putting the stress that you feel, I think, is so much ego bound. And when you really come from a place of love, like everyone's talked about, Linda's described, when you come from a place of love, you really are doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, and you feel that you're all aligned. And the balance that you feel with your mind, body, and spirit all come together, and that's mindfulness, and that's being thoughtful and kind to yourself. There's a beautiful poet, Maya Angelou, who the main part of this beautiful quote is, you may forget what somebody did, you may forget what somebody said, but you'll never forget the way they made you feel. And to me, that's one of my favorite lines, because that's what we're trying to do, is be kind to one another and understanding that we need each other more than anything.
Yeah, it's interesting because in a pandemic or any kind of challenge, if personal challenge, collective challenge, it's so easy, the natural reaction, and it understandably is to pull in. And
Hmm.
yet, what we're talking about here is, what are the ways that we've contracted? Now, what are the ways that we can pause, notice, and start to extend and expand and evolve through this challenge itself? Not after it, not waiting till after, but through it.
Hmm.
So, as we transition, I've got one last question for all of us. As we transition from this year 2020 to 2021, I know I'm seeing in the media, not only are we transitioning, but we've got the great conjunction happening on December 21st, where Jupiter and Saturn start to look lined up. I mean, so much is happening. We've got solstice, winter solstice. So on so many levels, from astronomical, as the astronomy,
Hmm.
to symbolically, to spiritually, this feels like a bigger transition to most people. And I'm wondering if you gave all of us one bit of advice on how we could create a healthier, more inclusive, and sustainable world as we shift into 2021 and we want to contribute to that kind of world, what would it be? And Lynette, I would love to start with you. If you've got one bit of advice for us.
Yeah. I mean, this was a theme that was brought up a lot, which I'm going to say that as we look into 2021, I think the biggest thing that we could take from all of this is this need to connect and collaborate. Um, we've learned that this whole lone wolf and self-madeness has driven us to constantly run on a hamster wheel and chase a carrot that we'll never obtain by ourselves and alone. Um, and this has been a great awakening to our need to reach out to one another and to connect with one another and to see how we can be a resource to one another. And so I think we need to take that attitude into 2021, and how we can do things more together. How can we create more art together, because that's what this is, right? We are, the way I look at it, you know, from a religious and a spiritual thing, is I'm co-authoring this story with God. And so how can we create a lovely love story together as our, you know, in our oneness with one another and with all of creation? So that's the way I would look at it.
That is
Pretty.
beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. Isabelle, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that a healthy and sustainable world starts with healthy people, because healthy people have a ripple effect by having healthier relationships and by having more conscious decisions for the well-being of others, our planet, and for the common good as well. But to be healthier, I think that individually, each and every one of us has to take full responsibility for our own health in a holistic way. So meaning physically, mentally, emotionally, and of course, spiritually, because all those aspects of our being are deeply connected and in interaction with one another. That's what I think.
I love it. I love it. Linda, how about you? Do you have what is one action that we could take?
Um, Similar to what Lynette said, as I would say, connect. And that's looking at first connecting with yourself and then being willing to connect with others and expanding that circle of connection to be able to connect with people that come from different backgrounds, different faiths, different ideologies, to recognize those differences, but to recognize those differences without judgment, without assigning good or bad, but just to recognize that difference and to really be open to connecting.
Thank you. Thank you. And Rabbi Deb.
I think, you know, the word mitzvah, you know, is a Jewish word. It's a Hebrew word. And a lot of people think it's a good deed, but it's actually means a commandment and it's a responsibility. And the way I look at it is we want to think about our lives of what we can do every day. It's nice to think about, you know, speaking to God, like Linda said, you know, what are you going to rehash on the day of your death or when you're in heaven, and thinking about that. But what can we do every day to make a difference in somebody's life? And if we look at it like that, I like to look at it like that because I want to take notice that it's our responsibility. It's like a commandment to make the world better and to give back to others. And I think when we think less about ourselves and more about the other, we start to recognize more love in our lives, and we act in a manner that's much more inclusive. So think about one thing that you can do every day that will change somebody else's life and make that person happy, and that will bring your happiness guaranteed.
That's beautiful. My sister passed about 12 years ago, and I actually interviewed her beforehand. And we had a beautiful conversation, and I asked her, what does well-being mean to her? And Rabbi Deb, you just reminded me of it. She said that well-being is a state of mind, and that when she serves others, all she knows is when she serves others, she feels better. So there's this virtuous, this very generative cycle when we're able to expand, when we take care of ourselves, of course, but we are able to expand from that place of well-being. We gain as much as we give.
I really, I feel honored to be able to be in a leadership position where I can teach younger people that even at the age of 3, that they can make a difference. And we start early. These kids are starting at, you know, like 3 years old. If they can talk and they can make a little colorful picture, then you teach that it's not about yourself. It's about the other. And when we start really early and model that for the new generation, I think that that's just going to make it better for people.
Yeah, thank you. thank all of you for this conversation. This has just been, I can tell you for myself, my heart, my chest feels warm, my heart feels full, and it feels expansive. And I feel like I have been personally lifted by just listening to you and asking you questions. So I just wanted to thank you for the time, and I know this will be such a valuable conversation for anyone who is able to listen to it. So thank you. And Nancy, I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap us up.
Well, Renee, I couldn't agree more. I've just been inspired, is probably the best way to say it, by all of you. And the major theme that came out of this for me is around, we have to look within ourselves to figure out what we need to do to make the world a better place. And through giving, through outward actions, through community and collaboration, we can thrive and our well-being is enhanced. Research has shown that, Renee, as you pointed out. And it really speaks to what GW4W stands for as an organization. We are here to hold each other up, to lift one another up. We are a collaborative organization. And I'm so grateful for all of you coming together today in collaboration to talk about such a impactful subject, and one that we will continue to focus on at GW4W. Let me just say to the audience also that we are having a companion series that aligns with this one next week. It'll be on Tuesday next week. It begins at 8 a.m. Eastern time. That's 5 a.m. in my Pacific time zone, and it's 10 p.m. in Japan. But we have leaders across the globe that I'll be interviewing, and this panel is about women leadership and global peace building. And I suspect that a lot of this same kind of conversation will arise with that group as well. So I invite all of you to participate in it. So grateful again for all the women who have stepped up to support our organization and to align for the higher purpose and the greater good. So thank you to all of you. And come to GW4W, gw4w.org. Visit us and participate and become part of us. We want to know who you are and support you as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.